So purpose of business, make money. Purpose of government, serve its citizens. Businesses make money by generating revenue, and government serves its citizens by spending taxes. They're fundamentally different. Government shouldn't be run like a business because their purposes are two very, very distinct things.
Two totally different things.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of the Real Profit, Real Perspective podcast. There's now two of us this week. Really appreciate you, manning the fort last week when I was sick, burned out, under the weather, whatever it is. But how's it feel to not be staring at a camera recording this week?
Right, all the above.
Yeah,
I'm just glad I didn't burn the place down.
That's really I'm glad, because it would have been really inconvenient if I was laying there comatose. You burned my recording studio down. I would have had to ask a ton of questions because you're like 800 miles away. But no,
So
good to be back. What the hell, Ryan? It's easier ways to claim insurance.
Sometimes I don't even know how I do these things, but
you truly are a man of many talents. That's one of my favorite things about you. Is I just don't know. I'm going to find something new that you're just so damn good at.
Right? Hey, I'll take it.
Look, in this day and age, it's important to take all the little wins that we can.
Absolutely, man. But yeah, I mean, it went pretty well. I was happy with the end product, and then went on a little vacation. Now I'm back, and yeah, we're here. So,
I mean, anytime somebody does a successful 20-minute recording, that deserves a vacation.
Yep.
You worked really hard last week.
So after this one, we have earned about 3 or 4 vacations between the two of us.
So I think if we use the scale of a 20-minute video is worth 1 vacation, are we assuming that it's just the solos, or are we also going to apply this to all of the videos that we've done? Because I have to admit, starting to crunch the math in my head, if 20 minutes is 1 vacation, which means 60 minutes would be 3 vacations, and we've put out 20-something hours of content, that's about 60 vacations right there.
It's a lot of vacations.
Considering the absolute lack of vacations I've taken over the last 6 years of starting to go into business, I probably am due for a real vacation.
Dude, you need like a sabbatical or something. You need to just check out for like 3 months.
You are definitely not wrong. It is one of those pesky little things, though, where, when you've also got other people working on stuff, you can't, as much as I absolutely love my team and my guys are great, I couldn't check out for 3 months.
You can't just fall off the grid for a quarter of a year.
No. Despite my best attempts, I usually do have things that I have to deal with. I just figured that if I keep this up, I'm going to get so used to being able to just constantly be in a state of work that I'll just naturally learn how to both work and vacation at the same time. And then, burnout won't be a problem, and then I can, sustainably work 80-hour weeks.
Right? Work is life, and life is work, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, definitely. There's a certain phrase that comes to mind involving work, but considering everything going on, I'm not going to say it here because we're not monetized yet, but I think it would get us demonetized.
Before we even start.
Before we even start. But no, you did a really good job last week. I was actually earlier today. Actually, I was watching the video. I was eating lunch. I've got to say, I can't. It's lucky that I've managed to do enough sessions of editing to get used to hearing the sound of my own voice, but once I finish editing and post the video, I am nowhere near narcissistic enough to actually watch the video in its entirety. Once it's edited and it's done and it's uploaded, nope, never. Hey, you want to come watch that? No, absolutely not. I can't do it. So it was kind of nice actually being able to consume our own content here. You did a really good job.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
I should actually take vacations and have you do more of these. I thought it was a clever idea doing the, seven deadly sins of business, which I don't know, every week that goes by, it feels like that number goes up and up and up and up is
Yeah. Thanks, man. I was sitting there like, okay, what do I do for a solo episode? Like, how do I do this? And I started just kind of looking back at everything we'd done, and I don't know, call it divine revelation or something, but the idea just popped in my head. I was like, oh shit, we have a lot of stuff that we've covered.
we have
And
talked a lot.
yeah, so I was like, there's at least 7 different lessons from these episodes. So let's combine them, and then we got what we got. So
Take 7 lessons means there's probably about 6 hours of content. So let's take 6 hours and condense it into 20 minutes, and here's what to do.
yeah, because I mean, pretty much each of the lessons was an episode or more that we'd done on it. So sometimes I felt like I was constantly like, yeah, go watch this episode if you're if you feel like you're experiencing this one.
I mean,
But
it's always good when we can do a, hey, if you like this, go watch the earlier one that inspired this.
yeah,
Please go watch the earlier content. Please go watch the earlier content.
where I speak for about 2 minutes on this topic. In this earlier episode, we spoke for about an hour on this topic. So
Go into substantially more detail.
yeah, yep,
Yeah. But no, it's been interesting kind of doing the balance between the solo, it is interesting trying to just talk to a camera
yeah,
on
yeah,
your own as opposed to something like this where we still, we can't be like those other cool podcasters out there and be in the same room and record everything and have all the fancy stuff because we don't have enough money for a, full proper studio.
maybe one day.
One of these days, if people will subscribe and then we can actually derive revenue from what we're doing instead of doing this purely for funsies. But it's one thing to sit and stare at a camera, but then have your voice in my ears to respond to and do things. And it's another thing to just sit there and look at that beady little eye on the camera and go, all right, well, got to say something.
Yeah. And that's one thing I missed, man. The back and forth and the flow was nice. Like it felt a lot more content-y to do than this does, I guess. If that's the right way to say it, I don't know. But
I mean, hey, the way when I was watching, it seemed like you've recorded dozens and dozens and dozens of videos and were an absolute natural YouTuber.
thanks, man.
For that, you have my kudos. So now that
Gladly accepted.
now that we finished patting ourselves on the back for the content that we put out.
It's all pre-approved as correct by me.
Oh yeah, I mean you do no wrong. Why I call you Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we'll let the viewers be the judge of that. We'll see once the comments start rolling in.
If you like it, leave a comment. If you hate it, leave 2 comments. We'll respond both. So, what's the big news this week? I know we were talking about it a little bit, and I know I've got a rant hidden on the back end for the latter half of this episode. I'm going to go ahead and tease everyone with that don't you skip forward. Don't you skip forward. Let's get through the good content in the beginning, and then we'll get a good rant session going on. But man, what's the big news this week?
Whew. In these times, you can ask that question every hour, and it's probably something different. But at the time of this recording, the biggest thing that's happening right now is the government shutdown. And mixed in with some jobs reports data and some interesting stats we found as well on that versus, comparing small businesses to sort of the bigger business jobs report type of data. So we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about for sure. And I know we've had some questions coming in, probably on both of our ends as this season, taxes start to get really relevant again, and it becomes the favorite part of the year. So now through pretty much definitely the end of the year is pretty, tax planning heavy, but then once we flip the calendar comes all the tax fun and all that stuff. So we got a lot coming up, man. But
when you lay it out that way, it makes me want to take a nap. Man, think of the next 6 months. It's just going to be nothing but taxes with everything going on. I'm like, yeah, Yeah,
Ugh,
yeah, yeah. It
yeah.
sounds great.
Hey, that's what a lot of the furloughed government employees are doing right now too. So you're in good company,
Ooh, man, that would be a sick burn if government employees actually listen to podcasts
right?
or if the government employees that I've met in my life are anything to go by, they definitely don't listen to personal improvement podcasts.
And honestly, I didn't even intend that as a burn. It's just like, yeah, I mean,
I
they're
did. I
they're at home
absolutely did.
just they ain't got nothing to do right now, so
Look, I'm not saying that every time we talk about the government, I end up having flashbacks to the government audits we used to do and the wonderful individuals we'd have to deal with. But what
I
I
still
am saying
shiver.
is that some of those stereotypes of government employees were earned for very real reasons,
Oh
and
yeah.
I will exercise my First Amendment rights to make fun of them.
Yeah. I think the the statute of limitations on that has long expired from now, if it never existed in the first place. But
Hey, dude, what are they? They're government employees. What are they gonna do? Do extra work? Come on.
they didn't even do the work that was assigned to them.
Hey, can I have this report? What do you mean? Okay, you're telling me that this doesn't exist. But my dear individual, I would like you to go through your memory banks and think about a year ago to when I was here asking you the same question at this same computer for this same report that you pulled from me from the same computer system that we're looking at right now. So don't you tell me that you can't find it because I know it's there. Oh, hey, what do you know? We found it. Yeah, that's what I thought. Hate you. It's okay. My therapist says that it's healthy to work through these things on air.
We've still got the repressed feelings from God, almost 10 years ago at this point.
Shut up.
hmm
Shut up. Shut up.
Yeah,
Shut
I
up.
regretted that as soon as it came out of my mouth.
Man, it's wild to say something and then immediately go, nope, shouldn't have done that.
hmm
So I got a question for you. So you know I love to ask you questions. Because as we've established, you are far more knowledgeable and far more intelligent and have far more skills than I do.
Ah. well,
Take the compliment. Just
well,
say yes.
say just for the sake of improv, we will roll with that. We'll go.
I have never
Yes,
said a lie
and
except for the things that I've lied about. Um, hey, we're not under oath, so we can say whatever we want. And as we've seen with some things, even being under oath, it doesn't really matter. Um, so let me ask you this: government shutdown. Everyone's talking about it. How's it impacting your business?
yeah, it's funny. Funny you ask because I was actually just talking to my wife about that last night because it was just kind of happening and um I think she had watched a video on what the impacts were and like I mean the first answer in that video and in my mind is like it really doesn't impact your everyday person and it isn't impacting me right now at least for the first little bit. Like what we were talking about, like the first impact you might see is if you travel, like TSA agents are federal employees. So airports are probably going to be kind of a mess for the next God knows
When
how
aren't
long.
airports a mess?
Yeah, right. Like who knows what the difference will be. But I mean, honestly, right now, the government shutdown, the really larger macro trends in general aren't really affecting my business aside from what might happen in the stock market because that's tied to the assets I manage for clients and that portion of my fees goes up and down as the stock market does too. So it does have a slight impact. And I mean, if in the worst case, like things crash down, like that would not be great. But
Less than ideal, you would
right.
say.
But where we're at right now, I mean, I'm not seeing a huge impact. But what about you?
I mean, pretty much all of our revenues derive from businesses, and at least for all of my clients, none of my clients receive government money. If they do, they're not telling me about it, and I'm not seeing it in the books. As they say in Senate hearings, to the best of my knowledge, it's not impacting any of my clients at the current point. a loss of cash inflow. Right. Now, and for full transparency, I haven't fully looked at all of the different government services that, are potentially going on freeze and stuff like that. And I think
Hmm.
generally where it starts to hit a little bit more, I think, is in more of social services. I think a lot of times science can, the academia in particular, a lot of research can at times be kind of at the initial brunt, or businesses that have government contracts that then get frozen, I think, is usually where you get kind of the most immediate. I know some of the stuff with the
Yeah.
VA is also potentially having some slowdowns there. So it's one of those where, I mean, at a basic level, it really just depends on your exposure to the government funds in the short term. I mean, neither one of us are worried about, something catastrophic happening to any of our businesses within the next week because of this. But it's interesting in it's kind of the follow through effect of it, of the areas where the money is going. When that starts to dry, where does that kind of ripple out? And but I mean, that takes time for that to happen, if it lasts long enough for it to really have an impact. I do have
Yeah.
a buddy of mine he's in the National Guard, and he works for the government as well. And he would basically laugh because they'd go through the government shutdowns before, and it was basically just free time off because they'd end up getting back pay. I was like, well, that's lucky for you. Shut things down, then get paid for everything, and you're
Kind of
not
a
allowed to work.
perk.
Yeah, and you're like, yes, cool. So from, and this isn't an authoritative like, oh, this is going to have no impact, 'cause it is going to have impact. But I think, for a lot of small businesses out there, a lot of individuals, the social programs probably, I'd say, have the biggest exposure if that's being hit. Like you said, TSA, which is always a shit show.
Hmm.
Nobody goes through the airport and makes it to their destination without feeling worse. Pretty certain that jet lag is just delayed TSA induced stress.
I
It's
would
not the
tend to agree with that statement.
Yeah, it's not. It's got nothing to do with changing time zones. It is entirely because of having to deal with the TSA.
Yeah, and you talking through that kind of rang a bell in my head of like with especially on the government contract side, like businesses who are actively like receiving revenue and that's sort of their sole driver of the business. Like if that stops, I know we've talked about the velocity of money on here before and sort of how that plays into like economic trends and there's so much talk of possible recession coming and a couple episodes ago we were pretty in depth on that on the Fed rate cuts, but it makes me think like, yeah, I mean, obviously outside of my business there are immediate impacts from this happening, and with those sort of businesses you were talking about, like that revenue cutoff can have pretty large impacts like pretty quickly, like if I don't know, a contractor's building a building or something and their revenue source gets cut off, well, then all the subcontractors under that get cut
Hmm.
off and all the employees who work for them, maybe that, I don't know, maybe they get payroll, maybe they don't, I don't know, but just
Furloughed
sort of
for a
that
bit as they
chain
wait.
of and that
Yeah.
cycle of money flowing through, like that's a shit ton of money that gets cut off. Like the pipeline just stops.
Yeah, and it's always felt first in those that are the direct recipients of the funds. And this is where at times I don't envy economists at times when they start to receive questions of, well, how's this going to impact the economy? Because you're talking about a beast with literally billions of interconnected moving pieces.
Yeah.
And it's a, what does the government shutdown mean for your business? It's like, today, probably not a whole lot. If it does, you don't have questions. You know how it's impacting you. There is
Yeah.
no doubt in your mind how it's not impacting, because you already know either we're not getting that draw or this grant is on hold. I think usually Academia, I think I mentioned, is where a lot of times this gets hit because then the science grants and everything basically get paused and frozen. I've actually got a friend of mine who's
Right.
a PhD researcher. He has his PhD, and let me try to remember because he was just kind of talking about it a little bit. Basically, it was one of those where they don't know the status of the grant, but even with the shutdown, they wouldn't know till December anyway. So weirdly enough, even for them, it's already funded, but they just don't. They wouldn't know for a few months anyway, and
Mm-hmm.
so even the government shutdown doesn't really impact a whole lot there. Again, not to say that it's not impacting things because it definitely is going to. But I think for a lot of smaller players in the space that we call the economy, it'll not directly hit, or if it's going to impact you, there is no doubt of how it's going to do that because you already know which payments you're not going to be receiving right now because you've been dealing with the government already.
Yeah. Yeah, and for sort of everyone down the chain from that, it's really just a TBD for now because you just have to see how that. I mean, number one, how long the shutdown actually lasts. Because I mean, today it could close, but it could also be TBD, TBD long, you know. So
Yeah, it just depends on, if Congress can get things together and get, funding passed and all that stuff. Um, who knows at this point? But, if it's a week, then it doesn't really impact because then once things open up again, stuff starts going, and a lot of times you still have government services that even when it's technically shut down, they still keep, you know, doing their jobs because they still have an obligation to work and they know that they're going to get, furlough, back pay, whatever it is.
hmm
So, I don't know. It's one of those where I know there's a lot of scare tactics around government shutdowns. Like the government is shut down. What's going to happen next? It's like probably about as much as this last time it shut down, which I think the last actual shutdown was I think in 2018. I thought.
that's what I was trying to go back in the years in my head and like when was the last time this happened? I think it was 2018. It's been a while.
Yeah, that was 2018. I was still working for the audit firm, so I definitely wasn't paying
Yeah.
attention because it did not impact us at all, and we had a
Yeah.
lot of procedures to perform.
Well, and it all just blurs together because you hear, I swear you hear about the threat of a shutdown every 6 months. Like, I should probably know how often this happens, but I mean, it all just blurs together in my head. It's like, God, this shit never ends, man.
It becomes a bargaining tool or a threat and of, we're not going to pass the funding and this is a blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then it just keeps, rinse and repeat. It'd be nice if it wasn't kind of a constant thing that was talked about. But, when you really get down to it, a lot of times you've got too many people that want to keep the flow of government funds to their various areas. So, like anything, if you start trying to, it's funny how government spending, much like a cat, will expand to fit the space that it is in. And I guess
100%.
it's not so much, I guess, not the government spending, as I'm rethinking this analogy on the fly here. But basically, as soon as you've got, government money available for things, you will have vendors and individuals and problems arise to occupy 100% of the funds available. It's kind of funny, how that happens. And so, you get into circumstances where they start talking about, cuts to government spending and, why is it so difficult to, cut back on that. And it's because it turns into a gigantic game of, well, you can't cut that program because that's for my constituents, but let's cut this thing. Whoa, 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 you can't cut that. That's for us. We got to cut this other thing. And then everybody goes, we need to cut spending, but not my spending.
Yeah. Well, and it's so backwards, I think, from how everyone understands spending in a personal and a business sense. Like for your business, you want your budget to be as low as possible because that means more profit for you, right?
Hmm.
Like unless you've got other things you can spend on to make more money, like reinvesting into the business and all that stuff, but just high level you want it to be as low as possible. But in the government, if you're the head of an agency, like you are winning when you spend the most money. Like that's your goal, you know? If your department's growing, you are spending more and more and trying to take up more percentage of the budget total, but also growing the whole pie chart, you know, like expanding that so you can continue to grow. It's, I don't know, it's so backwards to me compared to like normal spending habits.
I'm glad you've brought up business and personal spending in the same sentence as government spending. So let me ask you something. You know, I love to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I want to learn from the sensei, even though this is a little bit of a loaded question. Just
Those are the best.
setting you up here. Oh yeah, setting you up here a little bit. In your opinion, when businesses spend money and governments spend money, you know, everybody talks about the government should be run like a business, right? What is your opinion on that thought that a government should be run like a business? Do you agree with it, disagree with it, agree with parts? What's kind of your take on that? Because that's a constant thing that comes up when you start to get into the topic of government spending.
Yeah.
So you know, where do you fall?
I love that question. It's like, honestly, in a very nerdy way, it is one that I have thought about for years and years. And I used to be in the camp that was the camp of, yes, the government should be run like a business. And I don't know, over the last 10 years, I've changed my perspective on that. Like it, in the way I just explained, like how government spending is different from a business. And I'm going to try to collect and articulate as well as I can here without like going all over the place. But
I'll ask questions to give you some guidance if I think I need to nudge you a little bit.
yeah. So, I mean, if you think about a business traditionally, like without endless venture capital funds or something like that, like you have a limited revenue source. You know, you can go out and grow your business and that gives you more and more money to spend. But the government is totally different than that. Like we have different revenue sources as far as income taxes, but and then property taxes and you know, go down the list of taxes. Now you're also kind of throwing tariffs into the mix. Like that's another thing you can mess with. But I mean, for the most part, unless you're going to raise taxes, that revenue source is pretty much fixed or the population grows, you know. But the other way the government raises money is by printing more of it. And kind of like I mentioned before, like expanding the pie, you know, you don't have a set money supply. Like that's why we have inflation every year, because we keep growing the total supply of money. So just fundamentally, the way the government functions is vastly different from a business. And I mean, you can prove that in itself by just looking at the debt. I don't even know what we're at this point. Like
The number's so large, it's functionally meaningless. I think we're, you know what? I'll give me a moment here. And
yeah.
I'll tell you. Let's
say
see.
like
Current
even
U.S. debt. Let's see. Here's the real. Oh my God, what is this website?
is it the one that constantly is just like counting up and up?
All right, I think this is a good one to do a screen share on, so that I can really emphasize. Oh my God, what is this website? Here we go. Share screen window. This one.
Oh yeah.
This is first time I have ever seen this one.
This one is crazy, dude.
Let's see. So top left here, I can't draw on the screen share. I have a whiteboard pulled up, but it obviously won't work for this. Hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, 37.5 trillion is the current U.S. national debt. The spending is 7.4 trillion, and the current budget deficit is, I think, what is that, 1.8 trillion?
So, I mean, that's my point right there. Like, if you look at the national debt compared to our like our GDP or our total tax revenue, like if you put those numbers percentage wise into a business or a personal household, like that's like it's like you making 100K a year and you have $1 million of credit card debt. Like it doesn't work, but it does for the government. At least it hasn't stopped working yet. And I think most of that is because one, the dollar is the standard, you know, across the world of trade. And we also have the military to support our claim that all of our debt is backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. So until your business has an army that can defend your massive debt, I don't think it's going to work the same way.
So, let me ask one question. Who are we in debt to?
Ooh, all of the people that buy U.S. Treasury bonds, which can range from individuals to the one everyone loves to talk about. China is a huge stakeholder of U.S. government bonds, and as are many other countries in the world. Just like a ton of different institutions, people.
Fun fact. Well, this is as of February. So first off, most of the U.S. debt is held by U.S. investors and other U.S. holders.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, fun fact, foreign investors only own about a quarter of it. As of February, do you know who the largest foreign holder of U.S. sovereign debt was?
Ooh, who?
Japan.
Interesting.
Yeah. China was second, and the UK was right behind. The UK, actually, this is as of February, so this is 8 months out of date. This is a Reuters article that I'm looking at right now. This is updated February 10th. But as of February, at least, China owns 768 billion, and the UK owns 765 billion.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, the idea that China owns all this debt and, could single-handedly call it all in,
Yeah.
incorrect.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Completely incorrect.
Yep.
Mexico actually holds 100.
That's like, it's a really good segue into what we were talking about before with the shutdown. Like what even is the shutdown? Well, a lot of times, or I think every time, maybe check me if I'm wrong, but it's because we reach the threshold of debt that is allowed under the current budget.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
It is. It's. I think this is when they usually get into talking about raising the debt ceiling and stuff like that. So,
Yep.
usually, I think it's caused by one of two things. I believe there's technically a delineation here. You know what? You know what? I think it's a good time to try out.
Ooh.
Oh, it's time. It is
Here we go.
time. Here we go. So we know everybody loves a good whiteboard. So let's go ahead and give this bad boy a go. So in previous, let's see here, clear canvas. There we go. And I'll use my pen. We basically got two different things. We have the basically we've got one where it's due to the I'm going to have to work on this. Passing of the budget, and then we have the debt. I'm going to have to practice a lot. Debt ceiling.
Not too bad.
Hey, it looks about the same as my actual handwriting. So we basically have two different circumstances that will result in a government SD for shutdown. And it actually is two separate things. So I believe, now you may need to check me on this one. You probably should check me on this one. Is the current shutdown is due to a budget passing. I believe that's the one that's going on here, but I can hear you typing, and I would appreciate a fact check on this one.
Yeah, let's see.
Because I would have, if it was due to the debt ceiling, I would have thought about hearing more, but I'm pretty certain this was due to not getting a budget passed on time.
Yeah, so according to whitehouse.gov, lawmakers had until midnight on September 30th to pass another continuing resolution or a full budget before the current stopgap.
So
yes.
cool. I was right. So basically what this means is the government, in order to spend money, has to have a congressional approved budget by law in order for that money to legally be allowed to flow. So when they don't pass the budget, so when this isn't here, if you think I am going to work on, it kind of ends up turning into the same thing. This is the spigot of money, going through that approves to then come out and trickle on and all that. Right. I mean, I am kind of making this analogy up on the fly. But basically, the approval of the water to go through comes from the budget. The budget allows the money to flow. And so when they don't, they're not allowed to spend that money.
Yep.
Right. So they have to approve the amounts to be spent. And because they haven't done that, that has resulted in a shutdown where they're not allowed to spend money. The debt ceiling can result in, I believe they would talk about raising the debt ceiling in government shutdowns, where basically in order to continue, again, the flow of water going through, they need to, in a way, almost increase the water tower that is feeding the water through the system. It has to get larger in order to meet all the demands. And so when they run out of an issuance of debt in order to pay for things, it's kind of like you've got to increase the size of the water tower to put more water in to keep things going. Right. So these are kind of the two different ways that we usually get into. This is, as soon as Congress passes the budget, it's kind of like you have turned the spigot off. Right. So it's been turned off until they say you're allowed to let the water flow again. It's allowed to flow. Everything's been approved. We have to kind of increase the supply of the water going through.
Yep.
That makes sense?
Yep.
I'm really glad we had this idea. So that I can draw. I didn't realize I could be doing water analogies. But, for most of us, both of these kind of don't matter to a big extent. I mean, it is a big deal, but when you're a small business at such a micro level, it doesn't, we are, as small business owners ourselves, if this is the stream of water coming out to go into the economy, our pickup from it is basically the very faintest water vapors half a mile away.
Like so far down the stream.
Like we'll eventually start, dying of thirst if we don't receive it, but we are so disconnected from a lot of that in our, direct businesses and our clients that it's not going to impact us but for a while, until finally we go, hey, wait a minute, Lockheed Martin stopped doing a whole bunch of work because the government shut down, and then everything kind of trickled through. They're not buying their suppliers and materials. They're not going, that velocity of money that we've talked about, and then the whole thing grinds to a halt.
Yep. Yeah, and you see, I mean, just through that example, you can see how different it is from personal and business, which is why I am in the camp now that the government should not run like a business. It should be run like a government organization.
So I'm going to keep drawing here. I'm like, man, we could do so much. What is in your mind? When we're talking about this, because everybody talks about running the government like a business. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between the purpose? Oh, I got to work on this. It's kind of like pump of government versus business.
I like the way you look at it like that. Because, yes, the purposes are totally different. Business, as like we've talked about before, the number one rule is you got to make money. So if you aren't making money, you aren't doing something right.
All right. So purpose of business, make money. It's the in your mind, what is the purpose of government?
Ooh, how do I articulate this one?
5 words or less.
5 words or less.
Doesn't let me
To
type. Ooh, dark
this is
text.
gonna
That's not working.
5 words is hard. To serve its constituents? Would that be the right way to phrase it? Serve is really vague.
I guess we're talking federal government, so I would say citizens in this one.
Citizens, yeah.
You know what? I don't like that's too neat.
No typing allowed on the whiteboard.
Yeah. To serve its citizens. I gotta use my arm more here. I'm getting a little too it's getting rough. This is readable. So purpose of business, make money. Purpose of government, serve its citizens. Businesses make money by generating revenue, and government serves its citizens by spending taxes. So they're fundamentally different. Taxes are not, they may say tax revenue, but that's because revenue is basically used as the word to describe all the money that comes in. But these are two totally separate intents behind it. Now, because we want to be accurate, there are functions of government that do operate as businesses. We both know that. Say, for example, you've got, if I remember correctly, a government-run landfill generally runs like a business. And it operates just like one. It actually does its accounting just like one. The whole purpose is to provide a service but make money at the same time.
Yep.
So, and I agree with you that government shouldn't be run like a business because their purposes are two very, very distinct things.
Two totally different things.
And I think that really plays into when people start talking about government being run like a business is sounding like a good idea, is I understand where the kind of misconception comes from, because really the purposes of taxes is to provide services to the citizens, really in a way, assuming that, everything's being done on the up and up. Right? The whole idea is that really the tax money will then return to the citizens in some form of service or an increase in standard of living is basically the idea. Think property taxes that are used as a cue. My Control Z is not working.
An alien symbol.
Where is my eraser? That. Aha. Alrighty, we're learning. So property taxes are used to fund education. And generally, there is a correlation between property taxes and the quality of the education and the overall socioeconomic standards of the area. And then you get into those, really the kind of downward catch-22 spiral of property values are so shit, we cannot generate enough taxes to then fund into the education system. But you take the property taxes, goes into education, which then should basically be through education going back to the citizens in a kind of perfect world. So, a lot of times when they talk about the evils of government spending, and never mind the fact that when the government spends money, right? So the government has a huge surplus. Hold on. Look, there we go. That's how I need to do that. First one was terrible. Ignore that. Has a huge surplus of money and they spend it. The question that I think sometimes people don't think about is where does it go? Government spends all this money on social programs. Where does it go? Somebody's getting paid. Now, the government may lose billions of dollars because of black site projects and the DoD never passing an audit, blah, 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 and all that. The money still ended up somewhere. So the question here is, where does the money go? And this is, when you look at it, it goes back to the citizens as it is spent on those programs. Say, take a social program, for example. Takes tax money, it's used to provide food to, homeless populations and stuff like that. Well, who's providing the food? To my knowledge, the U.S. government has not acknowledged the existence of a materialization device where they can basically say, I need a thing, and it pops into existence. To my knowledge. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it actually exists.
Yeah, I was going to say, that might be one of those things that's hidden up to this. It exists. We just don't know about it yet.
They're like, they're not ready for this one yet. We need another 50 years to kind of clear everything out. If we remove people's purpose in life, which is to struggle and make ends meet and all that, and suddenly meet all that, we're a little concerned about complete and utter societal collapse.
Yeah, they're all too preoccupied with AI right now. Let's keep the materialization device.
Yeah, we'll wait on the post-scarcity society until we figure out this whole AI thing. So, they spend money on a social program. That money goes somewhere. Somebody receives that government money. If they're buying food, let's say, for an example, they literally have a spending allowance at a social program to then go to buy food from Walmart. Walmart ends up being a recipient of government money because they approve with the spending card. There you go. SNAP benefits, right? EBT, that money goes directly to the businesses that are there. And so it's
Yep.
It's why as much as I fucking hate paying taxes just like everybody else. But when you look at it from the perspective of the entire community, it's not inherently evil. Now when it gets, obviously, throw corruption in there and it becomes a problem. But at a high level, and this is where I do try to preface people, like it does serve a purpose, and that money that gets spent ends up in the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
So
but it's always interesting to zoom out like that and think about it because, it's theoretically taxes are the, like you said, quote unquote revenue source that we, the citizens, have voted to pay ourselves to redistribute in some manner to benefit the citizens of the country, right? Like,
well, there's the thing that gets a lot of people is that word you just said, which is redistribute.
mm-hmm.
We can argue about how, taxes are effectively at times a redistribution of wealth. We have a progressive tax system. The more money you make, the more you pay in taxes.
Right. Yeah. And you think about it like the education example. Like we theoretically voted to subsidize education through high school because we collectively acknowledge that it's good to have people educated to a certain level. So you do redistribute like a portion of your own income to benefit everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and there becomes a certain point where you do have to, piss people off and say, yes, we're taking money because this needs to happen because it is for the betterment of everyone. Because otherwise, people will generally act in their own self-interest. And if we just leave it, this is where I do go, if you leave some of these things just purely up to the free market, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah.
If it gets too unregulated, we go right back to the Gilded Age.
And that's like, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but part of the purpose that I left off of that, like to serve its citizens, that I was also thinking of kind of enforcing the social contract, quote unquote, of that. Like there are always going to be people who don't agree that that's the right place to send the tax money, but there has to be something that enforces that for everybody. So that was my other thought too, but that didn't fit in 5 words. So
yeah. I also wrote a little bigger than I was anticipating. Um,
Hey, it's the first time with the whiteboard.
It is. I mean, I think it definitely, now that I'm re-looking over all this, some of this is hard to read. I think it works better definitely in the moment. But
I really like this though.
I gotta say, I did have somebody who said we should have more on-screen things, and I think having the visual aids like this, and
Yeah.
if we're gonna turn it into a lecture, here's some visual stimulation for all you dopamine fried people out there. The other thing, when they start talking about government surpluses, I'm gonna go ahead and just clear this. I don't have anything to draw right now. But my question is, look how clean, look at this, it's clean. If the government is sitting on a surplus, right? They got a ton of money that they're sitting there not spending. Why did we take it in the first place? If the point of government is to effectively spend taxes to take care of the citizens, if it's sitting on a pot of money, it's running a surplus, so the tax revenue coming in is in excess of what it needs. Why are we taking the excess in the first place?
And that also occurred to me when we were talking through that, like through the revenue sources, and I'm blanking on it, but there must be other revenue sources that aren't taxes, right? Like we have tariffs that come in from other countries, but I'm thinking like maybe
that's import taxes.
yeah,
But
like that's where a surplus could come from, though, I guess, is like you're saying, because theoretically the taxes should all be spent. So if there's a surplus pot of money sitting there, maybe it's from some revenue source that wasn't like a tax, I guess, if I'm
well,
explaining myself well enough.
I think in previous periods where we've had that, what ends up happening is that the idea behind a $0 budget, which is a weird phrase if you've never had to deal with not-for-profits or government before, is that basically your revenue equals your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
This is a $0 budget, right? A lot of not-for-profits will do this. If you're donating to a not-for-profit and they're just accumulating a pile of money, why? Why are they just sitting and accumulating this money if it's not for a specific purpose, right? This is either a $0 budget or also called a balanced budget, right? Where at the end, your revenue equals your expenses. You've spent all the money that comes in, which means you have in some form or another utilized all the resources that are available. Now, if a business is running at a $0 bottom line, that's terrible. Because they're spending everything coming in. They aren't making money, right? It goes back to that. And they have no profit, and there's concerns over what's going to happen into the future as they generate business.
Yep.
Right. Government is different, though. Oftentimes, government revenues derived by taxes, which are enforceable by law. Most businesses, yes, there's contract law, but you don't have the same level of accountability for not paying your business debts as you do not paying your taxes. You won't. I don't think you can go to. No, you can go to prison for tax fraud. I'm an idiot. You can, when you start trying to hide stuff, they will send you to prison for that. I'm a fucking idiot. I should know that. I was thinking debtor's prison. You don't go to prison for debt anymore, but for fraud taxes, fraudulent dealing with your taxes, or you start dealing with unpaid taxes, you can have some serious penalties, right? So there's a little more assurance over the revenue and that they spend it. So there was a point I was making. I just lost it because I had a brain fart here about, yes, you can go to prison for tax fraud. The whole idea is that you should be spending the money coming in, because if you have, and it's not so much we're doing a special initiative to raise, so we've got a special thing here that we're going to use to build a pot of, money here that is then going to be used to, say, do road improvements and stuff like that. Right? That's different. But if you have this continuously building cash balance for the government, why are you taking from the people if you don't need it? I'm all for safe operating margins and having a reserve fund and stuff like that, but a true government surplus, It shouldn't. Why? Why is it taking more than it needs? We should be
Or
running it at
on the
zero.
other hand, not spending enough. Like you said earlier, it's got to expand to fill that.
Yeah.
And that's where all those departments are going to see like the surplus and get all starry eyed. Like you're going to say, oh my God, we've expanded the pie by X%, and now we can all spend 10% more this year.
Yeah, it's amazing how it is one of those where really you throw human nature in. Man, if there's government money available, oh, somebody's there to take it.
Oh, yeah.
It's usually a problem of, not spending too much. That's usually it. I think the 90s was the last time we had a budget surplus.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I had a rant. I didn't think this was going to go as long, but this turned into an impromptu philosophical lesson over taxes. Which, you know what? I don't really think that's too much of an issue.
So, yeah, we really took the bait from ourselves on this one.
You give me an opportunity to A, pull up the whiteboard, and B, go into a lecture to try and explain to people, at least at a high level, here's how taxation is supposed to work and the purposes behind it. I can't resist.
Well, and kind of like we started out at the beginning, I mean, it's big news, the shutdown. And I think it's almost bigger than we even thought about at first, because now that we've talked through it, it's like, wow, there are actually a lot of impacts. Not necessarily to us and our businesses at first, but looking at everything we've looked at, you can see how that sort of like trickles down the chain to impact everybody at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not using the phrase trickle down in like a Reaganomics fashion with, tax savings and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was still flowing off of your water analogy.
I'm thirsty. So I think the big thing from this, though, is, if somebody listening to this has a business, right, and you hear government shutdown, the obvious question is, what does this mean for me? What should I care about at this current moment? The government has shut down at this point. What should I do? I think the first thing I would say is don't panic, because at the beginning here, you're going to already know. If you're in a state of confusion on what it means, honestly, it probably means that right now it's not going to impact you a whole lot immediately.
Yep.
Because you would know if you are waiting on government funds that are not going to be coming through. So in kind of a weird way, if you're not sure what it means, you don't have to worry right now. And as this takes time to play out, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to do scaremongering. They're going to give an opportunity to scare people so that they'll tune in and click on headlines and see what's going on. Negativity in the news seems to be a constant thing we also can't help but bring, or at least I can't help but keep bringing it up. Is remember that you, the individual, are so small in comparison to the U.S. government and the spending and the economy as a whole, that in a way, when economics gets small enough, it's almost like the relationship between general relativity and quantum mechanics. In that, at very large scales, general relativity, Einstein, all that good stuff. I'm sure everybody listening to this is very well versed with physics. At the grand scale of very large things, our mathematical systems for physics accurately model what goes on. And we can see those trends just like you're planning out the orbits of bodies through the solar system. Right? We can map these things out. Everything behaves by clearly defined rules. But when you get very small and you try to apply those rules to the quantum level, so the very, very, very tiny, in this case, I would say the macro general relativity level is the United States economy as a whole, and you, the individual, are a small little quantum particle.
Mm-hmm.
Small little quantum particles cannot be predicted because there is, or at least appears, according to the articles that I have read about quantum mechanics, and I know that nobody actually understands quantum mechanics. So if this analogy is wrong, you cannot hold that against me because I do not understand quantum mechanics, but neither do you, and neither does anybody else. But you, the individual, are the small, tiny little quantum particle that is just adrift in the giant space of existence. But there is an element of unpredictability as to what you are going to do. So even with the macro trends going on, the government shutdown, the general relativity of the U.S. economy and where trends seem to be going, you're so small and tiny that in a way you have the ability to not be beholden to those rules. You are the quantumly unpredictable little particle that could.
There we end episode.
I mean, there was a whole. I know we had we got to be careful, or these episodes are going to start pushing an hour and a half long as we just sit here and keep talking. But there was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal we were looking at before that a lot of small firms in the U.S., according to the Small Business Economic Trends Survey, that I'm just going to run through these real quick. 32% of seasonally adjusted owners reported job openings they could not fill in the current period, to then contrast with the news from tech and other large companies that are going into layoffs and, other problems with large companies. Let's see, 28% have openings for skilled workers and 13% have openings for unskilled workers. Overall, 58% of owners reported hiring or trying to hire in September, up 5 points from August. That's 58% of, the small ones that have been surveyed here. 50% reported few or no qualified applicants for the positions they were trying to fill. 29% reported few qualified applicants, and 21% reported none. There's some other statistics here, but basically, the economist related to this for what is the NFIB again? National Federation of Independent Businesses, said the economy appears to have caught a second wind after sputtering through most of the year, but it's close to a jobless recovery as few new jobs are being created. While a recession appears unlikely, small business owners continue to grapple with labor imbalances. I myself, God willing, next year am planning on doing my own hiring. Now, I don't have anyone in my local area that I would be able to hire, so I am going to deal with that issue by hiring people virtually elsewhere to buck the current trends that people are seeing, because accounting firms as a whole are reporting a shortage of accountants.
Right.
But the thing is that generally, if you've got the openings and you're looking to pay enough, you're not going to have problems finding people. It's just they run into issues with culture and burnout for the positions they're trying to fill, and that is not something we have here. So to kind of put this in practical terms, in an industry that is suffering from a shortage of accountants as a whole, by bucking the trend of burning people out and keeping work-life balance for the employees, not for us, we're the owners, we gave up on that a while ago. But in an industry that is having problems with employment, by adjusting how we run the business and how we set up our processes to be digital to allow pulling talent from other areas, even as the macro, the general relativity of public accounting runs into these problems, my small little quantum particle of a firm is not having those struggles.
And I sort of visualize that too with the pie chart we keep talking about. Like, the big firms are trying to expand that pie chart because there's not enough population in that chart to feed their need for churn of employees, for lack of a better way to say it. But everybody in that chunk of the pie chart that works for them right now wants to, not everybody, but most people, a lot of people want to move and redistribute themselves from there to your part of the chart, which life is much better in that part. So,
well, why, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's little stuff like that when you are a small business owner. That is how you can weight the odds in your favor.
Yeah.
When they talk about, people in your industry constantly quitting, well, they're quitting to go somewhere to do something. So if you can make yourself more attractive compared to the competition, everyone else may be losing their people, but if they're losing people, those people have to go somewhere to do something, and you could be the place that they go.
Yep.
And you could sit there and go, it may be terrible in the industry, but things have never been better because we're capitalizing on the weaknesses on everybody else.
Love it, man.
That's all. Yeah, I think we've again crossed an hour. I want to be careful we don't hit an hour 10, an hour 20. I think we'll have to save for next week the rant about what a tax write-off actually is. Kind of circling back to what you said, the next few months are going to be all about taxes. So I think next week I think will be a good week to go into my pet peeves when people start talking about, oh, it's a tax write-off. And they just do it because it's a tax write-off. And it's like, all right, we're gonna go into the numbers here to basically explain why everybody who says that is wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that's going to come out of that one. I'm excited for that episode.
I'll make sure to really schedule just the worst meetings next week, so that I can be in a really good headspace to really get in and really getting, all right, you stupid some bitches. Now let's explain how a tax write-off works.
Get those rant juices flowing.
Ew. On second thought, let's not. That's a disgusting phrase. I can't believe you'd say something like that. You want to do our little bit of an outro here, Mr. Bannister?
I can. Yeah, I think you hit the big points on the head. Like, good takeaways from this one, and I think in the next episode too, that's sort of the segue from this episode of like a larger trend, economic trend type of discussion to kind of the other side of taxes, like you said, with write-offs and like when you're filing your taxes individually and as a business, like how does that work and how does that flow into the system as larger, and then it flows up to where we're at today with, the government shutdown and IRS, like tax revenue as a whole. So I don't know, not to go too in depth, but good stuff. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate you, especially if you've listened an hour and about 6 minutes in to this point. So, yeah, I don't have anything else, man. What else do you got?
Neither do I. All I
Awesome.
have is we will see everybody on the next episode. See you then.